Hello, friends. Welcome to class today. My name is Chantelle Hoffmann, and I am honored to be one of the instructors for the Mont Blanc Inspire Writing series. This class, I think I can honestly say, is the most beautiful letter forms in the English language, which is the Copperplate capitals. And in honor of that 100-year history, I had a fountain pen shipped to my door. Yes, I didn't have it. The amazing Mont Blanc team shipped this beautiful fountain pen from the Origin collection. Is the writing instrument that I am going to utilize today. We talked a little bit about copperplate, and the structure, what it looks like in our last class. But what I want to call out is that while it is so beautiful and formal and it has this elevated look to it, I want you guys to know that you can use it for everyday use. Let's take a look at what the characteristics are of the beautiful copperplate capitals. You can see, for me, the capitals are kind of the showstoppers of this script style. Really, really elegant. I brought this out just to show you, if you look at the 3 C's here, each one is different. So there is a ton of variation. If this exemplar that I've given you guys here is just one example of how you can make these letter forms, but there are so many different ways that you can learn to embellish them. Also, at the end of the class, we're going to be practicing some of these words that you guys shared with me over on Instagram. The same consistency rules that we looked at with the lowercase. So we are going to be looking at that 55-degree slant that all of our letters are going to be falling on. So same slant rule. Same shading rule where we talked last time, where we're going in an upward motion, the line is thin, and when we begin to go in a downward motion is where we'll see that line gets thicker. So we've got slant, shade, size. We'll show you kind of the sizing. So our lowercase fall within this X height usually, and 2 times that X height is what I'm using. So this would be the same height here, and here is going to be the height of our capitals. And those are pretty consistent, with the exception of, some of the J and the Z are a little bit longer, but otherwise we're going to have consistent size of our capitals. And then we have, the same spacing rules. And if we look at, again, this oval in the O, a lot of our letters are going to be similar in width. Now, we talked a little bit about pen grip in the last class, so we're not gonna camp there too much. But one thing I do want to mention is when we are doing capitals, especially for writing larger, and when we get into flourishing, we're going to need a bit more movement of our arm. And so if we have our hand planted on the side, which honestly I don't find fault with for Copperplate calligraphy because it's written so slow, but when it gets to a capital, if I wanted to do a J, capital J, and I was going to do a really large one, that is quite a bit of space for my hand to cover if I'm planted hard on the side of my hand. So to help with that, especially if we want to get into some of these flourishing motions where we can still rest our hand on the side, we're just going to flex up that pinky a little bit. If you can see, but basically what I'm doing is I'm just kind of tightening that hand so I can rest a little bit elevated on the pinky. So I'm resting more on the pinky than on the side of my hand. That allows me, it's such a small movement on the side of my hand to on my pinky. This allows me the freedom of motion to really cruise around the page, and you can still have the stability to make those beautiful strokes. So go ahead and play with that a little bit as you're writing. Same goes for left-handed writers as well. You can still just flex that pinky and give yourself a bit more flexibility. As a reminder, we are going to be turning the page in order to help us get that consistency of slant. So if you are right-handed, go ahead and turn your page counterclockwise so that those slant lines are coming right at your body. And we write at about a 55-degree slant. And you guys are going to catch an error in these handouts later on. So keep this 55-degree slant, and you guys can flag when you find that I put the wrong slant lines in there. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. But you guys it'll be an opportunity for you to tune your eyes. So we can go ahead and practice some of these oval shapes just to get your fingers warmed up. You do not need to trace them perfectly, but the idea is we're just kind of getting ovals in our mind. This again is to practice that idea of up on the slant line, down on the slant line, keeping kind of consistent space between these strokes. And you can practice if you want to, again, kind of remind yourself about where you're going to add that thick stroke in with faux calligraphy. These are the basic strokes that we are going to need for the copperplate capitals. Unlike the lowercase, it's not quite as easy to make the capitals. In lowercase, we could do, we'll have an entry stroke plus an oval plus an underturn would give you that letter A. It really is that easy. The capitals are not quite that easy, but we're still basically going to camp out on these main strokes. So I've got it here where you can observe the first line. You can see the names of the lines there if that interests you. And for those of you who do want to go much deeper and to get more technical, feel free to reach out to me. I have some resources and courses and things like that, but I really want for our course and time today for us to get the essentials down. So we've got the names of the of the strokes there for you as well. So, but most important, more than the names right now, is this little arrow that's going to show us the direction in which we are making the stroke. So go ahead, you can observe the first one, and we're going to trace the second one here. So this one starts at the top. It's that S curve. So we're going to start at the top. There's a gentle curve, and then it's coming down on the slant line, and it gently curves out. Sometimes you'll see this stroke come back up, like so. But the portion that we really want to focus on is kind of that gentle stretched S curve. I find it helpful to imagine that it's kind of weaving around or wrapping around two little seeds. We'll call them seeds because it's April and I've got gardening on my mind. So we've got these little ovals that it's kind of just wrapping around, coming down the slant and wrapping around again. Okay, so go ahead and try one of those on your own down here, like so. And if you're doing a faux calligraphy effect, we can add that thickening stroke in here gracefully. Now, anytime we are doing a faux calligraphy effect, it can be kind of tricky to make that look graceful and not chunky. So a few things that we can do to make it look a little bit more elegant is, like I said, sometimes just retracing, I think is helpful, especially if you're writing pretty small, or have your pen in motion before it touches the page. That helps to prevent like a blob of ink soaking into the page. So we can kind of have it in motion, touch the page, and lift it still in motion. Helps to make it a little bit more graceful there. Okay, so that's the first stroke that we're going to see in a lot of our letters today. Then we've got a variation that's basically that same stroke, but it's a little bit more upright. And this is primarily just seen in the letter N, but it's that same little S curve wave to it. And that is also made from the top going down. So we're going to add that thickening stroke in the middle there. Then we have that same S stroke, but it's starting from the bottom. So this would be a thin stroke. So we're going to go a little kind of gentle curve on the bottom, up along the slant. And before we get to the top, gentle arch to the side. Then we have this oval or C curve. And with that, I want you to first imagine, here's kind of an oval shape. And that is what we are going to be following that left side. So it starts at the top. It's going to curve around along the oval and come up. Sometimes it will tuck back in on itself. Other times it will go elsewhere to connect. But here we're going to gently add that the thickness of the stroke kind of falls in this section here. So we don't necessarily, let me see if we can zoom in a little bit more. We don't necessarily need to zoom to slam on that pressure right away. Same with the S curve. We're not adding that pressure as soon as we're going in downward motion. We kind of let there be a little bit of thin to thick, gradually add in there. It makes it a little bit more graceful. Okay, and then we have these guys here. And this is where I break the rules a little bit with entry strokes. So typically an entry stroke, as its name would suggest, is the stroke that begins a letter. So if I was going to do a letter H, I would begin with an entry stroke like this and then do the S curve. And then this is like the C stroke. We've got this one that is very similar to that compound curve that we learned in the lowercase section, part 1 of our class. We're going up along the slant line, down along the slant line, and up again. Then we've got all sorts of variations of a horizontal oval. Sometimes this would go like into the letter C. Oops, made that much too short. Or the letter S. This can vary in size, so you could make that bigger. But the idea is it's an oval that's sitting kind of horizontally. That same oval can be made vertically at times. Let's try to do that here on the side. So you could kind of slant it like that, and then go into your letter C. Then we've got some variations on that, so I'll let you guys kind of play and have fun with this, and I will show you this one, especially when we do the W. Let's jump into our groups here. We're going to pay attention to these arrows, and the numbers there will tell us the order in which we create these letters. Copperplate is written very slowly and carefully, and so the order in which we do it will matter kind of how we're lining up our strokes. I did these samples were written with on an iPad. So what I will say is all the structure is correct. I'm going to point a little bit more towards some of the variations that we can make to make it look a little bit more like, if I was using a monoline style with the pens or with a flex nib. But this really shows you the bone structure that I want you to learn. The first one that we're going to do is that beautiful upstroke of the S curve, which we just practiced. And then the A it comes right down on that 55-degree slant. So a straight line down and stops at the bottom. And you can retrace that to add in the thick stroke there. And then we have a little angled oval that comes over, crosses that header, and comes out. And this is where it would connect on to the next letter of your word. So A, not too tricky. You do want to watch this space up here. If you were to come over and kind of not have that curve at the top, and then you came down on the slant line, you'd have a really skinny little A. So we want to remember to let our letters have that beautiful space in between them. So the way that you'll achieve that is making sure that we have that, remember, it's wrapping around that little seed up there at the top. Okay, same entry stroke here for the M. And the curve up, that S curve here. Coming down along the slant line, but before we get to the bottom, we're going to curve ever so slightly to the right. If I'm doing a dip pen or the flex nib, I tend to lift my pen there, and we're going to gently curve up along the slant line, but then over towards the right. And then this is that C shape, okay, where we add in that gentle curve, kind of the left side of an oval, and it comes up and around. If I was to write the letter M by itself as if it was someone's initial, I would take that stroke and tuck it back in on itself. And then I didn't speak much to these little micro dots there. Over time, I have actually started to prefer a larger dot there. So you can kind of play with how big or little you like these little, they're called terminal dots at the beginning of a letter. Having it a little bit larger, I find now to my eye makes it look a little bit more balanced. So again, you can play with some of that. The N is very similar to that entry stroke. However, this is where we make the variations. We're going to go up that same S curve. And now this stroke here is our vertical S curve. Okay, so it's not on the 55-degree slant. It's going to be a little bit more vertical. And I will show you why. It's a little vertical and then up along the slant to come out. If I did not do that, here's what we would have. Coming back down along the slant and over. Not only is it squished, it looks like it's leaning and it's going to fall over. So we don't want that to happen. We want to have a sturdy, strong letter N. So make sure that middle stroke is a little bit more upright. And that does have the thickening stroke in there. So you can retrace that to add it in. Another pretty element that you can do with this, just as we're thinking about flourishing, is you can extend this stroke up and over a bit. Just kind of adds that like kind of airy elegance to it. Get a little bit of thickening stroke in there if you like. Let's go on to the V. Now this V, we're going to not do that first entry stroke. I'm going to break the rules, even though it says 1 or 3 here for the number. So we're going to turn it as a number 3. I'm going to do this S curve. It's in a downward motion. And when we're going in a downward motion, we add that thickness. And kind of like this, and it's coming up. There's a little bit of a curve there coming up and over. So that S curve in an upward motion. And here you could come in and add an oval there if you like. You could try any of those variations of the entry stroke as a secondary stroke. the W here, I'll show you. It's going to be very similar to that V. So it's got that S curve. And here we're not curving it around like I did with, or we will for some of these strokes down here. It just stops right down there at the base. And it's going to kind of mirror itself a little ways on the way up along the 55 and then curves over and another S curve down, mirrors slightly, and then I'm going over and out. Okay, and that can extend like we did with the N, or it can stop with the header. This group, what they all have in common is this same S curve as their stem. Okay, so you're going to see it in all of the letters. So even the J, it's just going to be stretched out. So what I will call out is that our eyes, when we think about the letter P or a B or an R in regular handwriting, we think about that kind of ball shape being on the right side of the stem. And while that is still true of these forms, the majority of the big oval shape that we're going to be creating is actually going to be on the other side of the stem. So see this portion of the P and this portion of the B, it's actually larger than this portion of the bowl itself. Okay, it's same with the P, B, R. So I want you guys to really practice that these are big ovals. What I do not want to see is anything like this. Okay, and hopefully you can see it goes from elegant to just awkward. So it's not pretty, it's not cutesy. We don't want these curly cues. We want big, beautiful ovals. So to do that, we're going to start with that S curve stroke that comes down along the slant line, touches the baseline, comes up. Again, you can add that terminal dot at the end. You can do it small or larger. And then the second stroke is this oval that's going to be on the side. So we're going to start not too close, but not real far away from that stem stroke that we just did. And we're going to come down almost to the header. And we're going to do a nice, big, graceful loop around and then cross over. This stroke here can actually tuck back in on itself if you like. I feel like that gets a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more complex and steals some of the elegance for me, but that is an option if you like. The B is very similar, so we're going to do that stem stroke, same big, beautiful open oval that comes around. About halfway down that stem stroke is where we'll do a little flat loop and come back around, adding this bottom bowl. This is a matter of preference, but I like for my B's to have the top bowl be a little bit closer to the stem and have the bottom bowl come out a little bit further, versus with the R, you'll notice these are both in line. That is a little bit of personal preference, but I thought I'd throw it out there for you guys as we practice this. So I like to come out a little bit further with the B, but still maintaining that really pretty slant to it. R is so similar, I won't speak to it much, but same here. About halfway through, we're going to do that little loop, and then we're going to come down on the 55 and up. For the K, let's see, what was the other way that I think it had been like this? I had done a typical entry stroke like that, and then coming out, she said, it just kind of looks like that, like longhorn cattle coming both directions. So you can for sure play with the different entry strokes here. But again, like with the others, I do the entry stroke last. So we're going to do that same S curve stroke. And then the key for the K is to not have this too much of a bowl to it. Think of that same S stroke that we've been doing, but it's on a steeper slant. So we're going to come over and just kind of turn it sideways, that same S stroke. See that shape that we just created? About halfway down the letter, little loop, and then just like with the R, it's coming down along the 55-degree slant and up, okay? And we can add a different entry stroke to it so you don't have the longhorn cattle look anymore. So we are going to do this. People look at it like, oh, where do we start? We are starting with that S curve, like so. And then we're going to come back up to the top. And there is this little tiny flat oval. So we're going to come around and cross, adding the bowl. And again, this is another one that can kind of cross over if you like that. I usually don't. connect it that way. The one thing that we want to keep in mind to keep this letter looking elegant is, of course, keeping it on the slant, but it's the size of the space here in that beautiful oval that we just created. So what we do not want is to kind of get scared and get a little bit close there and smush that I. We want it to look balanced. We want it to hold its own when it's next to these other letters. So I want that space in there to be nice and big and broad and open, okay? The J, we're going to just think about, we took that S curve and we're stretching it out a bit more. This is a very long stroke to do, especially when you're doing it with a flex pen, kind of getting that careful control about where you're adding in that pressure is something that I want you to be mindful of. So we're going to still do that, like curving around a little seed here, coming down along the slant, and then as if this was about this part of it just being like that descender loop that we practiced in the first part of this series. It's going to come down here and stop right below that baseline so you could connect it up to your next letter. So that's the first stroke, is that S curve that ends in a loop. Then just like with the I, we're coming back up to the top, adding that little horizontal loop and coming around and up. Keep this big. There are different variations. Some are bigger than others. This, to me, is most elegant. And this, because this is in a downward motion, both for the I and the J, we're going to add that thickening stroke right in here. So again, don't add it up here. We don't want it thick all the way around. The way to get it to look really elegant is to just add that thickness, just kind of those delicate touches of the thickening strokes. Same big open ovals here that we had with the S. These can also be done at an angle like this and come around. With the O, again, no shock here that it is an oval form. This can be with the entry stroke or without, like so. And we're going to add that thick stroke right in this section here. For Qs, you may have seen a version that looks like this. That is traditional. It is hard for people to read, so I like to extend this portion down a bit more and make it look more like that big oval that we're used to seeing with a Q. And before we add that kind of flat horizontal oval that sits right on the baseline. For the U, again, a big, beautiful, graceful oval up here. It comes down along the slant line and back up. And another downstroke there along the slant that comes back up. Thinking about this oval, and if I cut that oval not in half, but a little bit like 2/3 on the left, that's where I'm coming down with the stem stroke. The flat oval on the left, and then I retrace this side. That is how I'm getting the correct proportions of how big this oval should be on the left versus the right-hand side there. Like that's what as curly cute as you will see me get in calligraphy. A little horizontal oval here, a larger base oval. So think about this being twice as big as that top portion. I hope you guys use the power of the pen to share joy out in the world today. And until I see you guys next month for our part 3. Bye all.